Welcome to I'm Your Target Demographic. This is your one-stop shop for everything that has to do with Omega level mutants. Now, if you've been following my channel, you may recognize some of this because I took all my videos about Omega level mutants and I'm putting them together into one video, which is right here. So now you'll be able to hear about kind of the stories of all of these characters that are super powerful in the Marvel universe. This is really nerdy, so if you don't want to get into this, I would watch another video. So you are going to see a lot of different cuts, a lot of different looks, backgrounds, things like that, because this is cutting together a lot of different videos that I had before. So with that in mind, let's start with the definition that I'm working off of for Omega level mutants. I've been thinking a lot about the X-Men universe and all the comic books, and growing up I was super into them and I read a lot and I had all the toys and I had all the cartoons and I loved it. And so I started thinking about the mythology that they've built and all this history, and I started thinking, who are the most powerful mutants out there? You know, who are the people that are game changers, people that can do incredible things? And I'm not talking fan favorites like Wolverine. I'm talking people that can do crazy things. So I found a lot of websites and lists and things talking about what are called Omega level mutants. And these are the mutants that their potential is almost unlimited. So how do we define Omega level? The first thing that seems to be pretty consistent among a few of these mutants is that they can affect other people on a genetic level. So they can make changes to their personality, their appearance, they can break them into pure energy, they can affect people on a deep level. An example of this is Elixir, who can change people's personalities, heal them of genetic ailments, things like that. The second thing is some powers that impact the entire planet, or they have powers that reach into different universes, dimensions, kind of it's beyond their immediate location. An example of this is Iceman, who could potentially destroy the world by creating a new ice age. Or Franklin Richards, who can create a universe. Much bigger in scale, but both of them considered Omega. The third type of ability that might be considered Omega for a lot of people is the ability to control essentially life and death. So these are people that can resurrect others, like the Phoenix, or they're able to come back to life. Somehow life and death don't mean as much to these people. The ability to heal themselves from an extreme wound sometimes falls in this category as well, so characters like Vulcan, where he could be on the edge of death and able to bring himself back to strength. A lot of healers aren't Omega level, but there's a few like Vulcan, Elixir, things like that are Omega level. So that's kind of the scope of powers that we're talking about. Some Omega level mutants meet several of those criteria, some only meet one, some barely meet one, but that's kind of what we're working with. First off, I want to talk about probably the most obvious Omega level mutant that most people in kind of the common mainstream world would know about, Jean Grey and the Phoenix. She is one of the first 5 X-Men, so she's OG. Now, Jean Grey is a mutant, is able to kind of read minds a little bit, like minor telepathy, telekinesis, so moving things with her mind. But things get interesting for Jean Grey when she is taken over by a cosmic entity called the Phoenix, or later referred to as the Phoenix Force. So they're in outer space, something's about to happen, their space shuttle's about to be destroyed, and this force protects her, essentially wraps Jean up in a cocoon, keeps her somewhere safe, and lives her life. So for a while, the Phoenix is actually living as Jean Grey on Earth and is able to do all these crazy things. Eventually succumbs to temptation and becomes known as the Dark Phoenix. While she's the Phoenix, she has some incredible powers. So she can use her telepathy to hide herself and others from other people with mind-reading powers, so she can kind of shroud themselves. She can create a shield with her mind. She can create weapons with her mind. She can create illusions that look real. She can control people's minds, their thoughts. She can use other people's bodies as her own. She can tweak their personality permanently. She can go into a mutant's mind and turn off their mutant ability. That's crazy. That's why she's Omega level. She can stop someone from being a mutant. While the Phoenix Force is taking over Jean Grey, she can travel through space, she doesn't need oxygen to breathe. She's essentially immortal. She can resurrect people that have died. She can travel back in time and see the repercussions in the present. It's said that she has control over all existence. So that's the Phoenix Force. Something we're kind of familiar with. It was in the X-Men 3 movie, though done horribly. The cartoons had a really famous arc about the Dark Phoenix. Now, as a note, back when I recorded my bits about Jean Grey and Rachel Summers and other people that are hosts to the Phoenix, I might have emphasized the abilities that the Phoenix Force gave them. And I know that the Phoenix Force is an entity, it is not Omega level, and that while they have that ability, that doesn't make them Omega level. But these characters on their own, without the Phoenix Force, are still Omega level. Just in those recordings, I might not have stressed the abilities that they have naturally, but they are Omega level without the Phoenix Force. Now we're going to talk about this guy that his name is Vulcan, not from Star Trek, different Vulcan. Now his birth name is Gabriel Summers. And if Summers is familiar to you because that's Scott Summers, Cyclops, and Alex Summers, Havoc, it's his brother. So it's the three brothers, and all of them have extraordinary powers. Their father is a space pirate named Corsair, who leads a group called the Starjammers. And his three sons they all pack quite a punch. Now, while Cyclops and Havoc were born and raised on Earth, Gabriel was born in outer space. And he was essentially raised in like a facility where they cloned him and made soldiers. But eventually he kind of grew up, escaped from this facility, came to Earth, joined the X-Men. But it wasn't long before he was brought back to outer space and essentially became a competitor for the space empires and kind of was a warlord, very morally gray. He took up the name Vulcan from Roman mythology, again, not Star Trek. So he doesn't remember a lot from his childhood because he was kept in this facility, but eventually he remembers his mother's murder, and he goes back to outer space to avenge her death. And so he's entirely filled with anger and rage and wants vengeance, and so that's why he kind of goes on this spree of taking down this galactic empire. Now, in terms of powers, why he's Omega level. Where Cyclops and Havoc can project energy, he actually absorbs it. So if they were to shoot him, he kind of takes in all that energy and then can redirect it out in whatever form he wants. So he shoots out energy in both his hands and his eyes, kind of a mixture of both Cyclops and Havoc. And then he can use this energy to create physical things like shields and armor, things that can protect him. And when he's facing others that project energy, he can either absorb it or he can shut down. He can control their energy and shut down their power, which is crazy when you consider a lot of big villains and heroes, I guess, use energy as a weapon. He basically turns that switch off. He can, like Jean Grey in the Phoenix Force, he can travel through space. He doesn't need oxygen. And then he can manipulate the energy of his own body to regenerate wounds and kind of heal himself. So as long as there's energy around him, he's nearly invincible. Now for this next one, it's going to be a little confusing because we're going to get into essentially alternate timelines. So how do I start this? We're going to talk about a woman named Rachel Summers, or sometimes Rachel Grey. Now, there is a version of I say our like we actually live in the Marvel Universe. There is a version of the Marvel history where Jean Grey was actually taken over by the Phoenix, and they weren't two separate people. And in this future, they had a child. So Jean Grey and the Phoenix and Scott Summers, Cyclops, had a child named Rachel. So Rachel mostly inherited most of Jean Grey's abilities. Telekinesis, telepathy, things like that. Now this future is where the famous Days of Future Past story kind of exists. So those of you that just saw the movie, maybe unfamiliar with a lot of other X-Men mythology, imagine in that future, Cyclops and Jean Grey had a daughter. And now here's where it gets interesting. In the comics, Rachel is the one that's able to send people's consciousness back into time. So in the movie, it was replaced by Kitty Pryde for some reason. But in reality, it's Rachel Summers that is able to do that. So she sends Kitty Pryde back in time to stop the assassination attempt and to fix things. But even though that mission succeeds, the future does not change. It essentially creates a new, happier future. But them existing in Days of Future Past, that is still horrible. So she then sends herself back in time to see why things went awry. So now that she's in current time, she's wondering, she's kind of shocked to learn that Jean Grey is dead at this point, when really she's kind of in this cocoon thing that the Phoenix Force had kind of hid her. So the world thinks Jean Grey's dead, but Rachel's like, I don't know about this. Anyways, the Phoenix Force ends up sensing Rachel and seeks her out as a potential host. And it gives Rachel all those powers that Jean Grey also had. So she was able to do all those crazy things, in addition to this time travel aspect, that she can kind of hop around time. Her ability to travel through time actually creates another alternate future, where she grows old and ends up taking care of what's essentially her brother, Cable. And so she exists in that future as Mother Exani, or Escani, whichever. And so she has multiple branching futures. So there's different versions of Rachel throughout time and throughout universes. So you can tell in the Summers and Grey bloodlines, there's a lot of power there. So now that we're talking about bloodlines, there is someone that's very powerful that is a son of Charles Xavier, and his name is Legion. Legion's real name is David Haller. He is Charles Xavier's illegitimate son, and Charles didn't know that he existed for a long, long time. So Legion started out having similar telepathic abilities, and when a group of assassins kind of attacked his home and attempted to kill his stepfather, he retaliated and killed them with telepathy. But when he did that, he became so traumatized that his brain essentially fractured. So now there's a personality within Legion that controls telepathy, and it's kind of this personality kind of associated with these assassins. But this started a trend of other personalities starting to pop up. Now, they all kind of fight for control of Legion's mind, which is why he has the name Legion. For in the Bible, there's a reference that someone says, "We are Legion, for we are one." Right? So it's kind of this multiple personality disorder. Legion's actual power is called spontaneous mutations, which is he essentially gains mutant powers all the time, which is crazy. And to help kind of cope with this, each power is assigned a personality. So for example, there's a character called Susan in Sunshine, and she is able to control emotions. Or there's a giant mechanical armor named Endgame, who's able to defend against almost any mutant power. So he gains these mutations and then has all these personalities that control them. So he's very unpredictable. So if he were able to control all these powers and mentally focus, he would be incredibly powerful, but in his current state, very unpredictable. Now we're going to talk about a mutant called Elixir. Elixir's real name is Joshua Foley. He started out as a healer, so he's able to heal wounds and kind of fix people up, basic healing abilities. The interesting thing is he actually began as an anti-mutant terrorist, and when he attacked a group of mutants, his healing factor kind of kicked in and he was able to heal someone, kept it secret for a long time, eventually joined the X-Men to learn how to use these abilities. The first time he ever healed himself, his skin turned gold, and that's kind of his signature look. Now, he's able to heal a lot of different wounds. He's able to rewrite their genetic DNA to fix kind of personality traits and maybe genetic issues. Now, he's an Omega level mutant because his healing abilities don't really know a limit. He may be able to actually change someone's appearance by tweaking their genetic DNA. In a very popular storyline, a mutant called the Scarlet Witch deactivated everyone's mutant genes. She said, no more mutants, and they were gone. He was able to actually go inside people and reactivate that gene, which at the time was crazy because she said no more mutants, and only 27 mutants existed. And he was one of them. and he was able to then reactivate mutants across the world, which is crazy powerful. Now, he eventually used his powers for evil, and he killed this kind of anti-mutant leader. And when he used his abilities to kill, he kind of caused organ failure and shut down this person's body, and his skin turned black. And it's very hard for him to turn his skin gold again by healing, so the black kind of reminds him of the evil things he's done, and he fights to heal more than he kills. So it's a kind of a constant battle between gold and black, and turning back into that golden boy that he was. Now, another young and powerful mutant. His mutant name is Kid Omega, but his real name is Quentin Quire. He started as a normal student, young at Xavier School. Brilliant kid. It's said that he has 10 million brilliant thoughts a second. Right, so he's just beyond anyone else's level. He saw himself as better than humans, though, so he became a huge liability when he started kind of anti-human riots, and he was very dangerous. He started a group that kind of would go out and kind of attack humans, a lot of stuff, kind of went rebel. Very powerful, though, mentally. He once killed a guy by, quote, carving his name on his brain. Right? Crazy. Weird. At one point, his telepathic abilities exceeded his physical body, and he didn't need to exist as a physical form anymore. So there's kind of a couple storylines where he's kind of existed in a non-real form, which is crazy. He's able to create weapons out of this energy, similar to how Psylocke can create swords and blades with her mental energy. He's known for creating guns, so he has a psionic shotgun that he uses, or a psionic sniper rifle. Kind of cool, but that's how he focuses his energy. He did encounter the Phoenix Force once, and the Force mistook him for Jean Grey. And so there's the potential for him becoming a host of the Phoenix Force, which would give him cosmic abilities beyond his wildest dreams. So that's why he is an Omega level mutant. Now, one that may surprise you. This surprised me when I read the list of Omega level mutants that this person was on there. Bobby Drake, aka Iceman. Now, when you watch the movies for X-Men, you may not think he's that powerful. In the cartoon, he wasn't really a star. It wasn't until probably after I stopped reading comics that Iceman became this powerful. So on the basic level, he's able to change the temperature of himself and things around him. Right? So he can turn himself into ice, he can bulk up, he can shoot ice, he can ride ice. But that's all fun and games. But why he's an Omega level mutant is that it's believed that he can change, in addition to changing his own body to zero, absolute 0 degrees, he can change the temperature around him, which could potentially spin the world into an ice age. That he could potentially cause global extinction. He can freeze someone's blood in their veins. He can create clones of himself that are completely sentient, and kind of they can move around and help him. Crazy. He can turn himself into moisture and then travel through bodies of water almost instantly. And since he can turn into moisture, if he's ever injured, he can kind of break himself down and then reform himself and heal all wounds. So he's almost indestructible as long as there's moisture in the air. And now you probably think Iceman is way cooler than you ever thought he was. Pun intended. And now we've got a trio. The first one is Cable. I talked about Cable in my video about X-Force and the potential movie or TV series that might be coming out, hopefully soon. But Cable is a telepath and telekinetic. He's very powerful. He is the son of Cyclops and a clone of Jean Grey named Madeline Pryor. They had a son. He grew up and then time traveled back to our universe. Super simple. And he's very powerful, but he's infected with this techno-organic virus that is slowly taking over his body. So he has to expend so much energy to stop this virus from taking over. If he didn't have to deal with that, he might be much more powerful. And I believe in the comics now he no longer has this virus, so he has a lot of potential to be Omega level. The second in this trio is a clone of Cable named Stryfe. Similar things, very powerful, telepath, able to read, control minds, telekinetic, super powerful. The third in the trio is kind of a version of Cable from another timeline that is somehow shifted and brought into our universe. Again, I say our like we're there. Brought into their universe. And so he's called Nate Gray, or X-Man. So he is a version of Cable, from what I can understand, that is younger and does not have the virus, so he has kind of all of these abilities at his disposal. There is debate over, is he Cable or is he just like Cable, but they both have the trademark kind of flashing eye thing going on. They have very similar powers. They're both kind of created by the genes of Cyclops and Jean Grey / her clone. So they're basically kind of the same people. Don't get all riled up in the comments if they are or aren't. I know it's confusing, whatever. But those three people all have very powerful abilities and are considered to be Omega level, or potential to be Omega level. And then we have, they call him Mr. M, but his real name is Absalon. He was growing up in Belgium, and he had his first manifestation of his powers when there was this bully, and he turned him inside out, which is very traumatic for a kid to do, right? Like, crap, I just turned someone inside out. Some of the things he can do: he can turn matter into energy and back. Crazy. He can create nuclear-powered explosions in the palm of his hand. He can speed up someone's ability to heal themselves. He can become intangible if he wanted to, or he can make others intangible. He can turn people's mutant abilities on and off. And he can create lesser life forms, or he can forcefully make life forms evolve. So those are all crazy abilities. When you're comparing things like that to Storm, it's a no-brainer that some of these people have powers that, yeah, Magneto's powerful, Storm's powerful, but this guy can create life, evolve life, become intangible, turn people into or out of mutanthood. Crazy things. He eventually evolved to the point of not needing a physical body anymore. So, as far as I know in the comic books now, he's just energy. They haven't seen him since then. Another incredibly powerful mutant is someone named Mad Jim Jaspers. This is a character I wasn't familiar with really before this, but he's basically a very old mutant, kind of from different timelines and different dimensions, and he can kind of warp reality, right, which we're noticing is kind of a common trend among a lot of these characters. And in another reality, he used his powers to change kind of the entire universe, and they had to kind of destroy that universe so that it wouldn't spread, right? That's kind of how serious this is. And then in our universe, he kind of, they think that he died, but he's shown up since, and so we're not sure if he's alive, if he's a clone, if he's kind of what he did to reality. Let me try this again. Mad Jim Jaspers changes reality. He can hop between realities, and it drives him crazy, which is why he's called Mad Jim Jaspers. Okay? That's really it. He's crazy, can change all sorts of reality, but super powerful. Another one of the most powerful Omega level mutants is a character called Hope Summers. There's a storyline where Scarlet Witch basically kind of erased mutant kind from the map. And Hope was the first mutant born after this time. When they thought there was going to be no more mutants, she was born. And her powers were basically to kind of mimic other people's powers. And mimic them not only on a very basic level, but almost better than they could do themselves. And supposedly other people, their powers get better when she's around. So they get better, she can do them to the best of their ability, she can take multiple powers at once. She is for sure an Omega level mutant, and they feared what she could do. So as a baby, Long story short, Cable, the time traveler, took her, went into the future, raised her, and then brought her back to current day. And so now, there she is. But this leads into a conversation about, is Rogue an Omega level mutant? Because if she could touch and take their powers, if she took the powers from an Omega level mutant, that'd make her an Omega level mutant, right? So therefore, is her power Omega level? And similarly, the character that was called Sync, which was a member of Generation X, probably my favorite comic book growing up, is able to mimic the powers of those around him, but not beyond. Kind of Hope can do it better than others, better than they can do themselves. And I don't know if Sync was like that way. So it brings up the question of mimicry and copying powers. Does that constitute Omega level? I don't know. But Hope Summers, definitely Omega level. And now our last Omega level mutant for this video. Franklin Richards. Now this is the son of Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman. So they both were kind of created because of this radiation storm in outer space, whatever. But they have a son named Franklin who is a mutant. And Franklin is potentially the most powerful being in the universe. Now get this. Usually, your mutant abilities don't manifest until you kind of hit puberty. But him as a child was already demonstrating incredible telepathic abilities. He was even able to realize that, hey, when I'm an adult, I'll have even more power. So he forces himself to age. He makes himself older. And after he taps into all this power, he does incredible things. He realizes, hey, I'm not emotionally ready to be this old and to have all this power, so he reverts back to childhood. He can control his age. At one point, his family, so the Fantastic Four, and some of the Avengers, they were all in danger. And to protect them, he created a new universe where they existed. So he created a universe and hid them there from harm. Now we're not talking time travel or going to another universe. He created a universe. There's a whole series of comics where he travels to worlds that he created with kind of odd partners, and there's all these storylines where he's kind of an outer space adventurer to worlds that he created himself. Now, one of the most powerful beings in the universe is Galactus. Galactus eats planets. So imagine, eventually the Fantastic Four and the Silver Surfer are able to defeat Galactus. But Franklin Richards, he's able to bring Galactus back to life. And then is able to control him. And they defeat this other cosmic bad guy. But Galactus is essentially his servant. Now there's a scene in the comics where Franklin ages himself to adulthood, and he's having a conversation with Galactus, and they're talking about the end of the universe. And so it's alluded to that they've both seen it, which leads you to believe that Franklin is immortal, and that him and Galactus will both be there when the universe is destroyed and at the birth of a new one. That's crazy. Now there's a group of interstellar beings called the Celestials that are very powerful, and they said that Franklin Richards is beyond Omega level classification. He's able to willingly travel through time. He can travel great distances through space. He sees the future in his dreams. And in his dreams, he's able to appear in other places and communicate with people. And due to his ability to change his age at will, his age is actually never referred to in the comics and is a bit of an inside joke. So Franklin Richards, with his ability to essentially be whatever he wants, be wherever he wants, and create anything he wants, is possibly the most powerful mutant to ever exist. And most often, he's seen as a little boy. Now, there are some characters that I didn't talk about here because it's hard to say for sure if they might fall under this classification. So that's what the comments below are for, is for you to argue your case for a couple different heroes. The first one is Storm, highly debated. One of my other videos just went crazy with comments about Storm. That is she Omega level, or is she considered an Alpha level, which is really powerful, but not kind of this unlimited amount of power. So what do you think about Storm? Magneto is another one that's highly debated. I'd love to hear your thoughts on if you think Magneto falls in this category. Professor X is often considered a Omega level telepath, which means kind of he's one of the best of the best, but he isn't often considered an Omega level mutant, so I'd want to hear about that. Other Omega level telepaths that are worth bringing up include Psylocke and the White Queen, Emma Frost. Other mutants, the Scarlet Witch is one that a lot of people are like, why didn't you bring up? And the Scarlet Witch is complicated because her ability is to tap into magic, and it's really magic that allows her to change reality. So that makes it a little complicated, like how much of that power is really hers versus the power she's tapping into. And some of the biggest things that Scarlet Witch has done, such as kind of undoing reality and kind of changing mutants and doing all this stuff, her powers were enhanced by the character Doctor Doom from the Fantastic Four during that time. So it's complicated to figure out what's really her power and how much power does she really have without that kind of bonus. So it's very complicated to talk about the Scarlet Witch. And also notice everyone on this list is a mutant. Okay, in my other videos, before I put them all together, there were a lot of comments about characters that are just powerful, but they're not mutants, and they therefore then wouldn't be considered Omega level. So like the Hulk, not a mutant. He might have been mutated, right, but not a born mutant. The one above all, which is basically God in the Marvel Universe, clearly not a mutant. Thanos is another species, but he's a mutant of that species. So it's complicated, but I wouldn't consider him a mutant. So we're talking humans born with the X gene that have incredible abilities. That's who I'm talking about. So that is an exhaustive list. Hopefully you found some of that interesting. There's some crazy characters that have been created in this Marvel universe that can do some crazy things. I find it fascinating. Hopefully you found it fascinating. Make sure that you check out my Facebook page for I Am Your Target Demographic. You can find all sorts of videos, movie reviews, statuses, all sorts of stuff about entertainment in general. So if you like movies, comics, video games, TV, stuff like that, go like that Facebook page. It's facebook.com/IAYTD. Also, I just have a full website, imyourtargetdemographic.com, where you can also go to find all of that stuff. So thanks for watching. I bet the comment section below is blowing up with stuff. So go down there and talk to each other and talk about Omega level mutants. Thanks for watching.